it was the guests that really get you through it. And that's why I always tell people, like, you have to find people that you truly connect with. That's when the podcast started clicking as far as guests and monetizing. And that's the...
Are you not getting the downloads you desire? Unsure about how to promote your podcast effectively? Or struggling to monetize your work? Well, you've just found the resource you need. Hi and welcome to Mics to Millions, the podcast that brings you exclusive, in-depth conversations with top-tier hosts in the health and wellness industry to help you grow your podcast. I'm your host, Sam Breakgear, co-founder of PodWritten, a podcast booking agency for health and wellness businesses. In every episode, we dive deep into what it really takes to get more podcast listeners, successfully promote your show, and monetize your work. Remember, if you like the show, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. This helps us grow, and in doing so, we can continue to offer you valuable insights and podcast growth tips. Now, let's get into it. My guest today is the host of Causing the Effect, a podcast focused on the true exploration of your mind and body to become your true self. The aim of the podcast is to share and serve valuable knowledge that will bring your life to a new awareness through modern psychology, practical wisdom, and physiology. Scott has a variety of guests he interviews, from scientists to psychologists and fitness enthusiasts, to name a few. The show receives roughly 55,000 downloads a month, and it's been running since 2019. He holds a bachelor's degree in accounting from St. John's University, alongside an MBA from the same university with an emphasis on accounting. He enjoys traveling, performing stand-up comedy, and podcasting to connect with human beings on a personal level and expand his mind. Scott Gazzoli, welcome to the show.
My man, Sam, with the big entrance. How are you doing, my man? Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here on the new venture.
Mm-hmm.
What's up?
Yeah, indeed. It's wonderful to chat with you today because obviously we've known each other for so long. And I've known about your podcast for a while, but really today I get to dissect how it all came together. And I want to start off by saying that I know one of the things that helped contribute to you creating Causing the Effect was a psilocybin mushroom trip. Can you take us back to that moment and what happened? What was that experience and how did it lead to Causing the Effect?
Oh, absolutely. So what happened for me, everyone, in my material world has always become pretty easy for me. You know, I got the good degrees, I did the corporate world, finance, hedge funds, blah, 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 run an advisory firm, work for billionaires, all this great stuff on paper. But I feel like a lot of people who are a little bit more conscientious than others really want more. And I was coming out of a tough divorce at that point, and I said, I'm not going to go backwards and waste time. I really want to figure out more of an artistic venture of what that is. So I'm lucky enough to have 8 guy cousins that I really consider my brothers. And we have a house that our uncle left us in Pennsylvania, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful place for us to get away. When I think of the Poconos, I think family, I think nature, I think it's our go-to. We're sitting up there, we got some Zeppelin playing. Everybody is like, screw it, let's all do it. Like, this will be an experience. So we all take them, and it was one of the nicest experiences I've ever had. And the second I started doing it, I swear to you, Sam, it was such this conversation with me, whoever it is. I personally think, it's just the other part of your brain, your unconscious, whatever it is. And it was just like, this is what you've been preparing for. Like you're here finally. Like, where you been? And you start having these conversations with yourself of the hard questions of, what do you want to do? What do you think you want to do? And the two things that kept popping up were stand-up comedy and podcasting. And I'm sitting there going, it's literally telling me this. I'm like, I know you're so right, but I just can't do it. And it's like, no, you're doing this, and you know why. You know this is the path. Out of that experience, I told myself I'm going to give everything I have to both of those ventures, to at least explore them and see what it was, because there was so much fear involved with things that give you meaning, right? Mine was stage fright or this or that, anxiety with judgment and podcasting and this and that, and it's become like such a part of me that I love what podcasting brought out of me and who that person became, when even these answers were right in front of me, and I needed to go down that path to really see what they had. It's been beautiful, honestly.
Yeah, you have definitely had some amazing people on your show and some very enlightening conversations. I can imagine it has had an profound impact
as
on
we
you.
know, for a lot
What
of
was your
people, I was
relationship with
there like for
podcasting
a
before
good
this experience?
stretch.
Was it a case that
I
you
was there because I
had
heard it
never
was
really
good
had
for
any
the
interest in
training that I
podcasting?
was
It just
doing.
literally came out of the blue,
And
or was this
I
something
used
that
to
you
be a
kind of been
shavasana
sitting
stripper.
on maybe
I'm
in the back of your
reformed
mind, and
now.
then
I'm
this
laughing to myself
psilocybin
because
trip
we were
really
talking a
just
little bit
pushed it to
about
the
this
front?
before we hit
So
record. But
I
used
remember
to
the
be a
first
shavasana
podcast I
skipper, meaning I
ever
took the
watched,
class. I
June
was seated, we rolled out
2015.
our
My friend
mats, and
turns
the
on this
instructor said,
show, and I'm
okay,
like, "What the fuck
lay
is this? These guys
down.
talking?"
It's time for
And it was
shavasana. I would just roll
Rogan
up my mat and I would
talking with
leave
Graham
because I thought,
Hancock and
what a
Randall
waste of
Carson.
time to just
Funny
lay
enough, I
there
actually
for a
got to
few
meet
minutes.
Randall
And
from being on the biggest
it's
podcast in
funny to me
Canada,
now,
which
if
is a
you
whole
would have
nother
told
story.
my
But that was like my
14-year-old
all
self, the
come around. But
shavasana
that I
skipper,
was very much
that when I was an
into
adult, I
just
would
Rogan
basically
and
teach
going deep
things
into
like
that.
yoga
Right
nidra
after I
and
took the
long guided
psilocybin trip and the
meditations that
podcast came
are
up, obviously
anywhere
you kind of venture
from
out into
10 minutes
all the
to basically
multiple,
a
and I would say
75-minute
a little bit
shavasana.
more
I wouldn't have
educational and
believed you.
useful podcasts.
But I
So
really started with
Okay,
just the
cool. So you had
physical,
this
and I
this
really
desire, this
enjoyed
fire
what yoga
ignited in you,
did
and I know
for
that
my
you created the
body in terms of
podcast in May
mobility, for
2019. What did
recovery.
that first year
And
of
then
podcasting
as
look
I got a
like for
little bit
you?
older, when I was
that
16,
first
my mom was
year
diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer,
that is the
and I was her
unsung
primary
hero year.
caregiver at
That
that
was like,
time.
what the hell am I
And I
doing? How
really
does this
started
work? This
to
is
have
not
my
gonna,
eyes open
nobody's
to
gonna
some of the
listen.
softer
Blah
sides
blah
of
blah blah blah.
yoga, the
That's like the
gentler
toughest year of
sides, the
podcasting
more
is
restorative
the
yoga.
first
And
year
then
because
also, I
you
didn't
have
know it at
no
the time,
guests,
but
you have no
different kind of
name
mindfulness and
tier to
meditation
deal with,
techniques.
and
And I just
it's
found that it
scary, honestly,
really
because you don't know what you're
helped
doing.
both my
You
mom,
don't
but also
know
helped me
the
during like
direction. And
such a
even I look at
challenging
that now, like
time.
there really is no
And that's
direction
what
on a
really
podcast
kind of
to become
introduced
popular. It's just
me
kind of do it your
to
own way.
some of the
But
softer sides of yoga
it
that
was
I've grown to
still
love
very
so much.
exciting because you're still getting your
And I
feet
didn't really
wet. Like
do
that's when I
anything
met
with
you,
it
Sam. So you get to meet
until
all these
I
people,
graduated
and I honestly,
college,
the truth was
and
like you're not
didn't
gonna
know
really
what I
have
wanted to do with
viewership
my
unless
life.
you're a
So I
big
did
name
what
in
many
life
did,
or a
which
famous
is take a
person.
yoga teacher
It was the
training.
guests that really get you
And
through it, and that's
then
why
I
I always tell
was
people
technically a
like
yoga
you
teacher,
have to
even though I was
find
still
people that
working
you
in
truly connect with. That's
management.
when
And
the podcast started
it wasn't
clicking as far as
until
guests
I
and
moved for
monetizing. And
love
that's
with
the
my husband to a one
when I
bar,
just started
one
like kind
Walmart
of throwing the book
town
out because I
in
look at it
rural
like everything else in
Midwest
life. Like you really have
America,
to spend the
that
first
I
six
thought, you
months
know
to a
what? I
year
have no friends here.
working
You're
on
in
the
school all
craft
the time. He
of
was there
okay,
for
how
medical school.
what is everybody kind of
And I
saying?
had
What
to
does the
leave my
book
job.
say?
I'm
The book was
unemployed.
saying, get
Why
sort of big
not
names so
try
you
to
can kind of
turn what I
monetize their
love, my
audience and get people from
passion,
their thing
yoga,
and get,
and
all the usual
ultimately
shtick.
mindfulness,
Do it 2-3 times a
into
week.
my
Have good
job as
logos.
well?
Have this.
I am so
Market.
glad you
Do all
did,
that jazz.
and I was waiting
I've
to
been
tell you
constantly
this.
growing, thank
One
God,
occasion on
since
my recent trip
2019,
home
but
back to the
it
UK,
just wasn't
I had horrible jet lag,
exponentializing the way
and
I
one thing
really
about
wanted
me
to.
is I really
And
struggle to
that
sleep.
didn't
And the
start
issue that I have
until,
is when I can't
shout out to
sleep, I get
Kesa
really
Karen, and
anxious about
she
the
was a
fact that I
super
can't sleep,
big
and it just
influencer that did
exacerbates
right by
problems.
us. That really put
And
us
I
on the
fall into
map.
this
But it
terrible
was kind of
cycle.
a
And there was on one occasion,
everything
I
happened
think
at
it's like
once
one of my
between
first
doing
nights
that
back in
and
the
just
UK, when I
talking to
was, it was like
people
4 a.m.
that I
I
really
was
felt
wide
like, okay,
awake, and
screw
I
with
was
how
just
many followers they
stressing, and
have, this or
I
that.
just
Like,
was so stressed that I'd
switched
like
it from, oh, I'm
sleep
here to
through the whole
talk
of
and be like,
tomorrow
I
and
want to
just
be
like
like
not be able
this
to
guy or
break this
that guy,
cycle.
and just be like,
And
how
I
could
actually
I
remember pulling out
have the
my
most
phone and put
authentic
my headphones in. I
conversations that
listened
add
to
value
your
to people's
podcast,
lives?
Mindful in
That's when
Minutes,
everything kind
and
of
literally
started
within
clicking. And I
20
would say
minutes,
that
I
was
just felt
May
this
2019,
huge change within my
probably
body. I just felt so
August
relaxed, and I
2020,
think
like
within 30
over a
minutes I
year
was asleep.
of really
So
grind.
I'm that is really awesome happy because to have you I on here feel that and talk about your your show, podcast, because you it can has tell that genuinely helped you me, are and there is so absolutely no interested doubt, in the given people that you go the after. huge amount of people And that it listen is to any of wonderful your that you reviews, also that use you your are show doing as like fantastic a things with tool it.
Oh,
for
I appreciate that
connecting
so
with
much.
people
And
that you
that's
genuinely want to
so
have some sort of
special and
a,
meaningful
I
for me
suppose, a
to hear,
conversation
because I
with.
really
And that's
like
obviously how we met.
when,
I
and
know
now
that we
Sam,
use
as
one
a
of those
podcaster
podcast
yourself,
matchmaking sites,
it's such an
and
interesting
I
experience
know you've
because it
been
can
on some
be
podcasts
such a
previously. You've done some
powerful and
guesting.
almost like
But what would
intimate
you say are
experience for
some
the
of the most
listener, because you
successful
have someone's
steps you've
voice
taken to promote
in
causing
your
the
ears.
effect?
But like for me,
The
I just have
number
this
one
tiny little
thing, to
closet
be honest,
under the
throw away
stairs
everything else
in
everybody
my
does, get on other people's shows.
And I just sit in
And
there in the dark.
doing
Just
that
currently the
is
lights
different
burnt
than,
out, and I
you know,
haven't
having a
brought myself
schedule
along
and
to
doing
change
5
the
in a
light
day
yet.
and just
And I
ripping
just
through it.
sit
I'm
there
not
in the
saying
dark
do
and I
it just
make
to
these
do it. I'm saying, like,
meditations,
do your
and you never
homework with these
know,
people.
like, my
Become a
intention
part
is
of the
always that it
show.
reaches the
I
people
was, and
that
this is
need
something I'm
it,
not even doing it
and
now, Sam,
that,
because that's why
you
I'm
know, it
not
helps
at
the
this
people that
this
are
big
looking
growing
for this
stage,
kind
because I
of
was doing that
thing.
for
But it's just
literally for
it's
2
always so
years. I was
special, I
going
think, as
on
a podcaster to
every week.
hear,
It
like, from
was
someone
produce
that
2 shows and
personally
get on
has
2 shows.
listened
So you're doing
and
4
has, like,
podcasts a
benefited
week
from the
of
work that you're
2,
doing.
just
'Cause on
getting
my end,
yourself
it's
onto
so just
somebody else's show.
one-sided. I just I
And
write
what
them and,
people would
you
say
know,
is, if
record and
Scott, if I'm
produce the
starting, how am I
podcast and put it
gonna
out
get
into
on a
the
big
internet,
podcast?
and I can see a
A,
number, so I know
you don't need to get on a
how
big
many pairs
podcast.
of ears
B,
are
if
listening
you
to the
get on a
meditations,
podcast that
but
has
it's
10
always really
people,
special to
and
hear, like,
that's
a story about it.
10 potential listeners for your show, 10 more that you had. That's the way you have to look at it, because the barrier to entrance that people forget with, oh, I'm just going to throw money. And again, I made that mistake. I'm going to throw money on Instagram. Some people on Instagram aren't listening to podcasts. It's just you're going to hit you're already hitting a market of people that aren't. There's no chance. It's a 0% return. If you get on other people's shows, you already have people that are listening. There are people that are open to podcasting. And when I really went on that grind, that with the mix of,
like geriatric for podcasting. Like
I did get lucky there with a couple of, I got invited onto a couple of good shows, but that whole process of crafting and going after that kind of marketing yourself, that was the biggest, by far the most tremendous to what got me to be as half successful as I am today.
That's awesome to hear, because it really resonates with, and it's in line with my own experiences. It's one of the things I'm super passionate about, helping the people that we work with get on shows, and that's one like our bread and butter of what we do at Pod Written, helping our clients get on shows so they can amplify their message. But I'm curious to know, in your case, you were mentioning that you said that obviously you did two shows a week, and then you guested on 2 shows. How were you able to guest on these shows? Like, how did you manage to reach out and get yourselves these guest spots?
So me and you hooked up using, I don't even remember the name. They shut down. You remember?
Yeah, I think it might have been Audrey.
Yeah, that was it. It was Audrey. It was definitely Audrey. I would say find one. You have to find one of those websites when you're starting off. And I'm giving you guys the first year here, when you're literally nobody. Like, I still remember my first guest, and I still talk to him. And literally, it's so interesting. He has like Martin Hewlett. He has a hypnotherapy podcast that helped me get through some things in my life, that now he's like a super big deal on the hypnotherapy scene. He was just so gracious enough to come on mine. But there's these websites where you're going to get on other people's shows, but then getting out there on Instagram too really gave me a better sense of like seeing what a person was, what they were about. And I think that is if you want to make it more let's say efficient, to get a flavor of, well, am I going to fit with this person, A, and B, is their audience going to drive with what my values are as well? That and LinkedIn for me, and to preface that, I spend my entire career, the last 10 years on LinkedIn on the business side, so it's always easy for me to kind of move through LinkedIn, but crafting a really understanding marketing message was like all I do in every asset of my life, whether I'm sending it to a billionaire for my day job, now I send it to a podcaster, or whether I'm sending it to a guest, or send it to a girl on freaking Hinge or the app. It's like, oh, my life is sending those messages, and that has been honestly, Sam, that's been like the one part of my life that I'm just so grateful that that piece, I put so much time into the psychology of what I'm trying to say, not being manipulative or deceitful, just having a catchy opener. If you ask somebody to be on a podcast, like I never wanted to feel like I was just trying to take from somebody. So I would just say, I'm more than happy to have you on to come on your show or do some promoting or something. And I think if you Google that stuff, I think usually that's what people would say now, but like genuinely, that's always how I've been. And I think that's part of what made people successful, is the mix of the reciprocity, but also like doing your homework and like not just showing up to the show and just like, oh, I don't know what this is, I don't know what you do. Like, I always took the extra step to really do my research, because if somebody's taking the time, whether they have nobody or the biggest show, I don't care. I want to jump in. That's part of the issue with podcasting, is most of the time people spend that first 10-15 minutes giving the intro, and like I never do that on my show, and I don't have to. I try to tell, like, let the guests do whatever, but let the person running the show do whatever they want. But I always told them, like, you don't have to let people get to know me, because like you can kind of layer your story and getting them to know you throughout, and just jumping right into a certain topic. And that could be another piece we could talk about, Sam, because that's the way I kind of another way that I tried to make my show different was like, I listened to a lot of these shows similar to me, and I'm like, all right, this is, I mean, hey, it's me, I'm the freaking show, and I got I got it, but I always felt they start off a little mundane, and removing that first 10 minutes of mundaneness and just jumping into like a really hard-hitting question or something of that level, you have to not only do your diligence, but you also have to have some sort of rapport with the person before you just jump on.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart way of approaching it, because also if everyone approaches it the same way and they have the same kind of like introduction, then you're going to get the same kind of response. You can sometimes hear that from some guests, like you listen to one podcast And it's almost like a
figure
carbon
it out as I
copy
go.
because they
those
just
seasonal breaks,
spell
what
out the
did it
same
look like?
things. They talk
How
about
would
the
you
same things.
structure it
So I
during
think
that
that's a really
time?
smart
If I
approach. And I
remember
also really like what you
correctly,
said
for the
about
first, I think,
never really
2
underestimating how
to 3
valuable a
years of the
podcast appearance can be,
podcast,
regardless of its
it's funny because
size.
actually everything
Because,
changed right
like you
around
said, I really
COVID,
love
which
your
we can
perspective of
circle
thinking like that's
back to
10 new
that.
listeners. And
But
also
that's when,
another
like, the
thing that's
podcast
important to
really kind of
consider, a
popped
lot of these
off and, like, I
conversations we
had to
have are
start taking
evergreen.
it, I say
So it
seriously,
means
like,
that a show
I had to
could
get a little bit
possibly
more
blow up.
professional with it
Like,
because way
yeah,
more
maybe it's
people
got 10
started
listeners
listening.
now, but who
But
knows? Like
I believe I
in
used
a
to
year from
take,
now, it could
like, a
have like
big break around the
100,000 listeners, and
holidays.
then your little
So
episode that
maybe,
you did
like,
is now
6-ish weeks, and then
exploded.
I
And
would do
also
that
there's so
again,
much
like, in the
importance of
summer.
like focusing
And
in on your niche.
if I were
A
to
lot of the
ever go
time when we
back to
get
that, those
clients
would
that
still be the
come
2
to
times
us,
a
they
year I
always
would
want to
take
be
a
on the
break
biggest
because,
shows. And
naturally, I
it's
have
great being
found
on those big shows,
listenership
certainly.
is
But if
down in
you have a
general 'cause those are 2
niche,
times a
it's
year
way
people
better
are
to
out of
jump
their
in and just like
routines.
dive into and
And,
speak to
podcast listening is such, like, a
even if they've
ritual
got
for
100
people.
listeners, but there are 100
And
listeners
so
that are
I think that I
exactly
just felt
looking
like,
for
well,
what
everyone's
you're
kinda
offering, and
checked
what
out a
you're
little
offering is
bit
very unique.
during these 2
That's
times of the
that's
year,
also really smart to
so I'll
go
just take
after.
a
So
little
I think
break
there's a
from
lot of logic
podcasting
in what you
too, and it
said there.
wasn't a big part of my
Yeah,
business
and
at
even
that
to get a
time.
little like on
So I think I
the
used to
person
take
with 10, right?
maybe
There's
6-ish
the
weeks
story of like
this
paying
year.
it back almost. And not
Okay,
only paying
cool.
it
And do you
back of
remember
like you want
what
to
the
help and
listeners
guide
were like
the
in
younger audience,
those
but like
early
not
years and
even
how that
if the
kind of like
episode
what
becomes
was a
big, but like
ballpark
what if
figure
that
as like
person
things
is like an
progressed?
incredible human being in
It's I
person
don't
and
even have
they
to
get
tell
to
you
have the relationship like me and you have now,
ballpark
Sam?
figure,
Like
Sam.
who cares
This is
about
my one
the value for other
piece. I was
people
actually
if you're
just
gonna
talking to
be able to help
someone
this person like
earlier
create
today.
a whole
But anyone
nother
starting a
like a
podcast
really
or anyone
wonderful
starting
relationship in your
anything, I
real life
highly
too.
recommend starting a
So I just never
spreadsheet in
judged
which you check
anything to be
your
too big or too
metrics,
small.
or
And
like you
I
track your
would say the
metrics
other
for
thing that
whatever it
people
is
have to
that you're
think about is
focusing
like,
on
what do
growing
you
every
really want
single
out of
week.
podcasting? And
I started
just
this
think
in
about this with anything.
2018,
Like,
so I
what do
can
you
tell
really
you that all
want?
the way
And
back
for me, I would say,
in
like,
early
let's start with comedy first. Like, I
2018,
didn't
my
realize that A, I was
podcast
getting a
was
little too
maybe
influenced by the
getting
Rogan
like
podcast, and B,
3,000
there's
downloads a
parts
week.
of
I can
things
tell you
that
exactly March
you
of
think you're
2018
doing
when I
it for a
started this,
certain
it had
reason when in reality you just want
3,055
fame
downloads
or
that
you
week.
just want this, you just want
That's
that. Like
awesome.
podcasting,
I
some
love
people do it
spreadsheets,
for that. Like
so I'm
luckily I
definitely gonna be
know
implementing
I've
that.
been doing this
And
stream.
the
I could do
reason
this
that I
for the rest
recommend
of my
people
life.
do this is
It's not for
because
fame.
like it
It's
feels like
nothing
you're
to do with that.
hardly
You have to
turning the
really
dial.
understand like if
Sometimes
you're
there'll be a big
trying
thing where
to
it's like,
become
wow,
famous,
there's
like
a
go
huge
on
jump this week
TikTok or
because
something.
of
Like
A, B, or
it's
C.
not
But
going to
for me,
be
it's really
what you
useful,
think it
like
is
on the
if you're doing it for
days,
the wrong
even
reasons.
now,
And
I
that
love
can
my
go for anything.
podcast so much. I
That
love
I
my
just wanted to say
community
that
so
because
much.
that's
But there's just
the
some
most
days where you're
upsetting
just
thing
like,
is when
oh,
you put in your time, your effort, you go
why did
100%,
I
which is
choose
all
this
hard enough to
path?
do,
Or
and then you think you're
this
gonna come
thing
out
has
of it
popped
feeling a
up or
certain way,
whatever.
and then
Like
you have to
some days
realize,
are,
shit,
all days are good, but
that's
some are better.
and that's what I did with comedy
And
because
I
it
can
was
go back to like this
I think
data in
there's
a
a
way,
path
or
there
just when you
with what
feel
I
like
did.
everything you're doing isn't
I
turning the dial.
understand now,
And
and
I
even
can
going
look
through
at like
this part of my
the
life of
difference
how
between a
important
year
the
or
word of
2
mouth is for
years
me, and how
or
important
3
the
or 4
freedom of
years.
mouth is, and how
And you
important
look at,
telling the
even if it
truth
doesn't
is,
feel
because
like in
that's
the
getting lost in
moment you're
today's day and
turning
age.
the
And that's why
dial, or,
I think
growing your
comedy
community,
opened
but
up a
then when you
door
look
for me of
back over
like, if we're
time,
playing a
it's
game, it opened up
so
this branch of public
special and
speaking and
humbling to
potentially,
see like
well,
that
yes, I'm going to tell you
long-term
that
growth
I
instead of the
need to go
short-term
out there
growth.
and speak more in public because
And I
there's
find that to
something
be
with connecting with human beings on
so
that level,
good to look
just
at
not about
on the
not
days
being
that
the
like
monkey
aren't
and
as
making people
great, or
laugh,
the
but like
days
having a
that, you're
conversation
just
like
feeling
this and just,
tired. And so that's
not
why I
talking
always
to people,
recommend,
Sam. Like,
like,
just I'm
even if,
not saying
you're like, I
do
have
the
20
the
listeners,
whole Tony
that's
Robbins
amazing.
thing.
Every week,
It's
just go
just
and look at
something
your
I don't
metrics,
know what it
put
is. Some
in
sort of oration
what
that I
that
know.
number
Yeah,
is,
real
and you do
connecting though,
that
but
every
not
week.
this
Like a year
bullshit, Sam.
from
Because I
now, look
see
back,
people and I go and I'm like,
and it's really
everybody's out here trying
motivating.
to
And I
tell
think it's
people the
also
same
really
shit.
like
I'm like, just
validating
have an
the
open
growth over time.
conversation with a guy
That
like
sounds
yourself
like
or
it
men
would
like yourself or
yeah,
people
would really help
like us that
definitely
just
during
like
those
could talk
lower
about
periods. And you did
life.
mention something that was
You know
quite
what I mean?
interesting to me. You
I
mentioned about
absolutely
how
do. And I
during
also love
COVID
what you
things
said about
changed, and
paying
you
it
said
forward
that
because
more people were
obviously this
listening and it
podcast podcast that we're on, we're speaking on right now, is brand new. And I've reached out to a number of hosts, and I have some kind of like connections with them. Maybe some of them I don't have like such a strong connection with, others that I do have a stronger connection with. And initially, when I was sending out all of these pitches to say, hey, I'm starting my own show, I really didn't expect to hear back from anyone. And I'm reaching out to lots of people, and they've got big shows, and I just expected to just get a lot of silence. But you know what? A lot of people, way more people than I thought, responded and said they'd like to be on. And one of them, and his show is one of the biggest so far that I've had on this podcast. And he said, yeah, the fact that you're just starting out is one of the reasons why I wanted to come on. Like I like looking, like helping the little guy out, sort of thing. So you have no idea how much it's going to impact the other person and just make their day or make them smile. And you're going to leave like such a lasting impression on them if you do pay it forward and you go onto someone's show it
for me, it
really
ended up
means a
being a
lot to them, more
blessing,
than
but
you
it
might
came
know
from something
probably.
obviously
Yeah,
that
and
was
I
so
think
like
that's the
horrible and
piece that like
scary. And
you
I, at
lose
this
sight of
time,
that
I'd
of
actually
because you get so caught up in the
about
numbers and
1 week before
Mm.
COVID,
if
I
you do
found
a
out that I was
podcast and
pregnant
you
with my
affect
first child,
one,
who
like
we
you
call
actually
Pork Chop.
change a person.
I
Like
had just found
I
out that
was
I was
like so
pregnant, and I
upset
was
when
so
I
stressed.
had
And
what
my
1,000
business
people. It's
model
like,
at the
dude, there's
time primarily
1,000 people
relied on
listening to what
traveling
you're
trainings and
saying. Are you
retreats. And
out
so
of your mind?
obviously
Like that's
we were
crazy.
staying
Like
at home,
if you have 20
flights were
people
not
listening, like
happening, and
every
all of that. And I
single
just remember
one
thinking, like,
matters. And
how am
the
I ever going to
more that you
survive
engage
this?
with them, that's what
And
people,
it
people
turns
think
out that there were a
I
lot of
just want to
people at
sit and
home
talk to you
thinking
and
the
talk
same
about
thing, like,
and
how
do
will
the
I
Jordan
ever
Peterson
survive
quote
this?
and
And there's
drop
so
this
much
quote and
stress,
look
so
like
much
I'm
worry,
wise.
so much
Like that's
anxiety.
not what this
And
is
that
about.
people
What
started
you're trying to
looking
do
for
is to
simple
help
ways
an
to quell
individual
that
at the most
anxiety.
basic
And
human
it ended
level.
up
And like how you
driving
said,
so
it's
much
to feel
organic
good,
traffic
but
to my
just being
podcast that this was
there
really the
for a
turning
person.
point
Like I
where I
had
went from being
I
like
was so upset because I
casual
would only have one or
podcaster to
two,
like
young men
podcasting is what
messaging
I
me,
do.
asking me for
And
questions. Like,
so,
who the fuck
it
do I
is
think I
interesting
am?
how sometimes
That
some of the
that's not enough.
biggest changes or
That's
shifts or
plenty.
even
And now,
blessings in life
ever
can
since you
come
switch
from
that and you
really
start saying, well, how can I
unexpected
provide
and
more of this
tough
to a
and dark
person?
things.
Then that person tells
And
their
so for
friends.
me,
And
to answer your
it's
question
like
about
that's why
being
you're here is to
professional,
be a
what
provider,
that
is to be a
meant
vessel
was
to help others.
trying to
Yeah,
treat my
definitely.
podcast a
That's
little bit
such a
more
important
like a
motivation
business,
because
at
it will
least on
keep
the
you going
back
through
end.
those
So I've never
difficult
really
times as
wanted the
well.
actual like
When
listener
you're
experience to
feeling
be
like, why
different,
am I doing
but
this?
that meant like
It
getting a
helps.
little bit more
It helps be
organized,
your
like
North Star.
posting
And
a
on the topic
meditation
of
every
really
week,
connecting,
starting
I
a
want to know,
different
like, how do
spreadsheet
you
where I kept
source your
track of
guests for the show?
topics. So I had like a
So
good variety of
I
different topics
am
on
very,
meditations,
very picky who I
you know,
talk to.
starting looking
Just
at
because, like, Sam, you
getting
know me. Like, I'm a
advertisers
kid
and
from
things like
Brooklyn.
that.
I
Like
have the
how
bullshit
if the
meter
thing that people
higher
are
than
looking for
most.
right now is my
And I
podcast,
really like
and the
with
thing that I
that
can do,
diligence of
basically
I want
having
to feel like I
a
know the
pandemic
person. Like
pregnancy from
that
my
same
tiny
diligence goes
apartment
into my
is
research of
podcast.
literally, and this is like
How can
across the board,
I
even with like the
make this
clients I
work
work
and
with, the
turn it a
billionaires I
little
work
bit
with.
more into a
I'm not just
business
taking a
on the
person just
back
to take
end?
them. You
So
have to
that's
have the same
what I
values
think
that
of
I
in
have. And I
terms
would
of like
say there's a
being
certain
professional
selliness that goes to
is
some
just taking it a
podcasts,
little
which
bit
is
more
fine. We're all here
seriously
to
and being
people are
like,
here at the end to
I
sell
don't know,
something
what
or do
can
something,
podcasting
but
do
like
for
you
me?
have to be
It sounds
authentic in
super
what you're saying
professional.
and like
And
have
I'm
this
curious to know, out of all
this
these things you've
honesty
tried, you
about
obviously
them.
mentioned
That's
there
all I
about like
really cared about.
hosting
That is the
meditations
most
each week.
important thing
I'm
to me
guessing that's like
because
some sort
if
of
you hang out
live
with those
meditation
like
outside of
who
the
you end up
podcast, right?
hanging out with in the
So
podcasting world is
I
very much
dabbled in a lot of
like in life.
things,
You end
but the
up
thing
kind of
that's always
taking
just
on
worked is
those
just
things. And then
what
maybe,
you still
you're
hear
hanging with the
on
person that's
9
going to get the fake
minutes. And
viewers or get
I
the
have a
fake thing
secondary
and this and that.
podcast
And
called
like you don't want to go
Meditation
down
Mama,
that
which is
path. You want to do
smaller, but it's more
everything the
niche
right way
because
because
it's
it's
guided
all going to pay
meditations
off in the long
for
run.
fertility,
I hope that
prenatal,
answers
and
it, Sam.
That
postnatal.
does. And I also
So like
want
a
to know,
really
like,
specific window in
what
someone's
makes
life.
a memorable
But the
guest for
thing
you?
that's always worked, I did dabble
Memorable
in some other
guest.
things, some live
The truth
events, things
is,
like
like,
that. But
I
just
find it
making a
so mind blowing that
meditation, like
people just
creating the
want to come talk to me
recording
for an hour that I really
and
try to
releasing
appreciate
it
all of them.
on
But
Sundays
for me,
just
there's a
seems to be
certain
the thing
connection
that
with
worked
a
and
certain style
continues
of
to work. And
person
like I
that's
said,
really
I've
been through
always
some shit
tried my
that
best to
I
keep
have found
the listener
myself
experience the
crying in the
same or
middle of so
better
many
as I
shows.
continue
That's
to
like,
do this. And that
what is
even if I'm
going on
getting a
here?
little
Like,
bit,
how does
tighter
this,
and more
how does this
professional
happen?
on
That
like the backside of
there's something
podcasting,
about
but that doesn't
the
change
ability to have a
the
person's
listener's experience
vulnerability
at
open
all.
up to you
Hmm.
and then have
Okay.
that you're
I
having
obviously
this
know from
moment with a
working with
person
you that
that is
you've
just
shared
so
your message by
memorable
being
to
a
me that
guest on
I
other
do find
shows.
that has
What
come
do you feel are
from
like some
the
of the most
people that you really
successful
least
steps you've
expect it,
taken to help
honestly.
promote
And it's
Mindful Minutes?
like did I don't think we
Well,
spoke since then,
not to
but
give
I
you
had
a plug,
GSP's wrestling
Sam,
partner on the show. Shout out to Tom
but
Murphy,
like
who I'll
that
Thank you,
connect
definitely
you
man.
with
helped.
after
Like
this.
you helped
He was
so
one of the
much,
guests
like
on. He was
helping me
awesome,
kind
and I'm
of
sitting here like
facilitate the conversation, like with
Sam,
other
ridiculous
podcasts, which
ground
is
game.
always a little bit
So
trickier
his
because
story,
since my
born and
show
raised
is
in
guided
Philadelphia,
meditations or
went through some of the
specifically like
hardest, toughest
meditation
things,
teachings, like
homeless,
on a
this and
particular
that, and now
style, or
fought in the
like I do
UFC, did
these
all this
3-part
stuff.
episodes, or
All
really I'll
he's trying
talk
to do is
about
give
like,
back to the
here's the
adolescent
101
guys
of like
because like
walking
you see
meditation.
way where
I
you
don't
end
have
up
guests or do
trying to
interviews on
fill
my
the
show, and
void of
sometimes that
what
makes it a
that
little bit
person was
trickier
missing as a
because
kid. So Tom, for example, had that rough
podcasters
childhood,
will
wants to give
often like swap
wants to
interviews
remove
and
that from the
things,
kids
and I
suffering
didn't really
that are
have
dealing
that
with
to
that
bring
now.
to the
And like
table.
when you have something like
So
that,
getting on
particularly,
other
similar to
shows
my
was really
childhood, this and
great,
that, it
especially
just
because
really hit with
when
me. And
someone's, you know, that I
those, the
think you're the
Hector
one that told me this
Marcel's,
stat, Sam. What's
it's
the stat if
been
someone listens to like one
beautiful,
podcast, they
honestly.
listen to like 9 a
That's
week or
fantastic.
something?
And
Yeah, they're usually
yeah, I
like
know over the years that we've
hardcore
spoken,
podcast
there are some
listeners.
people,
Yeah.
and we've had previous
And that
podcast
they
calls where
usually
we've
have
talked
their
in
like
depth about your
strong
podcast, and I know that
rotation
there are
of
so many guests that
podcasts
have
and
a
like, you know, they
true
listen to
impact
this on
on you.
this day.
I do want to pivot
So it's
away
always
slightly
great to
from
get
talking
into
about
other
connections and
podcast
more
listeners' ears,
about
because if they're
the
already
show
listening
itself, in the sense
to
that I
someone else's
know it's
podcast,
always been a
they're
passion project for you.
already
Like when you started
consuming
this, it was
podcasts, and
because it
that's
was like
often
a
one of the
calling
hardest
within your
parts
soul. That's
is
something that
turning
you
a
wanted to do
non-podcast
to
listener
fulfill
into a
something like
podcast
so
listener.
raise your spirit, raise your mind, and all of that. But I am curious though, like as the show grows, do you think that you, or have you like looked or used it as a tool to bring in revenue or monetize it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I do think that at least from what I've seen from feedback from people and this and that me not having an agenda is part of what makes me successful. Being like the real kid that's not gonna give you any bullshit. That's been a big piece of mine. But with that being said, there's two ways that I monetize the podcast. There's a sponsorship route, which shout out to our sponsors, Quantum Tech, Leela Quantum Tech, and then being able to really partner up with PR firms that like it came from ways that I didn't really expect. Like the sponsorships are the sponsorships. That's been the first way of doing it. But like these PR firms, they pay me to have exclusivity so they can have their guests just jump on and come on. And I think probably making maybe $3-4 a month on sponsorship. It's become where it's nice to just have the opportunity to reinvest in certain techniques where I'm not really using it for anything. But eventually, this is the issue. It's like if you keep going down this path, you keep growing, then the money will increase, and then you could potentially leave a job and do that full time and all that stuff. So yes, I have it. It's just really a nice way to not only prove people wrong, like, hey, idiots. Now I remember when I was doing this, the first 2 months I was doing it, people were like, what the hell are you doing, you whack job? And now it's like, oh my God, I listened to your podcast, this and that and this and that. So it's nice to find that balance of regular classical sponsorship way, but then like the PR firms came to me and I was like, I don't really feel comfortable because I don't know how this works. Like, no, we really want to if it's okay with you. So I should probably preface that with sometimes people get emails from when you start growing, and if your work is good and you're doing it in the right way, then they'll send you guests. I ended up having 8 or 9 different PR firms partner up with me, and each of them one by one, I guess maybe it's one of their tactics to do it. They wanted to offer me a certain type of money to have each guest on exclusively, kind of I guess quicker or this or that, and I'm more than happy to do that with certain firms that treat me right. So
yeah, I mean, like if you're adding value to your guests, then certainly you deserve to be paid for that. So I don't think there's any issue with you getting paid. And even if you did start it as a passion project, it's still a passion project. And I can imagine, and I know for a fact that you're going to be someone that like guards your show. And even if someone's paying you, you're still going to be someone that you vouch for. And I want to ask, you obviously mentioned that the PR firms, they came to you, but with regards to sponsors, Quantum Tech, did Quantum Tech come to you, or did you reach out to them? How did that first happen?
Yeah, so funny. So the CEO owner, Phil Fettering, came on, and he was recommended by one of the PR firms, and I loved him. I loved his work. They work with quantum technology and just sent me some cool stuff. And I said, listen, I love this. I'm gonna keep talking about it on the show. But that's what he's like. Yeah, I'll send you more stuff, and if you want, like, just fill out the form. We'll see if we can get people. And I started talking about it like for free, and then he was like, yo, people are really listening. Like, could we pay you? And I'm like, absolutely. So that's just one that kind of back-ended. But I've had Magic Mind has come on. The truth was, like, with them, everybody's come to me in some way, and that is part of the, I would say, I'm probably not the best guy to ask for monetization because I definitely could probably make a lot of money and do all this stuff. I just don't really, I feel like in a world where everybody's trying, and I just said this the same before, it's about how I look at life. Like everybody's always out to try to get something. Like I like being the guy that's not out to get something. Like if you want to bring it to me and I like it, like that's one thing. But like the Magic Mind people were great. Shout out to them. It just, I just didn't like it that much, to be honest with you. It just wasn't for me. They were a little too structured.
Wherever
and learning takes you. What advice would you have for anyone that's like looking to spark up a sponsorship? Obviously, they came to you, and this kind of like materialized quite naturally. But if someone is thinking of starting a podcast and further down the line, they do want to develop a sponsorship or look to have that kind of relationship, is there anything you've learned from having this relationship, particularly with Quantum Tech, perhaps?
Yeah, so I would say start with what you do like. And listen, it depends where you're at. If you're having 100,000 to 1,000 followers, the chance of you getting sponsored or not that way, but at least starting a relationship with them and reaching out to their HR or to whoever is that the publicists are, and having a conversation, just saying, listen, I really am behind X product. Like I love, I'm in talks with some
or
sort
I
of,
pull
I don't
from
want to
my
give
own
away too much
meditation
because
practice.
this
And
could
I
be
have
a big
found those
thing
are the
here,
two
but it's a
places where I pull the
protein
most
company. I just
inspiration. And
always drink
so
their
I
Sam.
might
Their
decide on a
protein
topic ahead of
is
time and say,
phenomenal,
okay, this
whatever.
week,
And I've just been
I
in
want to
talks
do
with
a
the PR
meditation
firm, and
for
they were like,
letting
"Listen, you're not
go.
too
But then
big
I'll
yet, but
kind of
just
sit
stay in touch with us and like let
quietly
us
for a
know."
few moments and think
And
about like,
that is like I
what does
know I'll
letting
have a
go feel
sponsorship with
like
them
for
one
me,
day
or how
because
might I
at the end of the
explore
day,
letting go
like
in my own
even if you
meditation
have a
practice?
person
And then
with
I can take
50,000,
that
like
and
for
sort of
me
craft then a
speaking,
guided practice for
eventually
someone
they'll
else
come around and
based
we'll work out
on
something
my
or
own
something of that. So
experience. And I think
take what you
that's why I'm
naturally
able to
enjoy
continue to
and
come
do
up
it.
with
And then on the other
different
end,
ideas. Is
I
that
think that
something like a
people put
meditation
this thing in their
practice?
brain
You're
with
always
making
exploring
money.
different things.
This is probably why a
Also,
lot of
like
people are
just
poor, right?
living
It's like
life,
I
there's new
don't
things that
deserve it or
pop
something.
up.
Like you
And I
deserve it.
really
If you
try to
have
pull
people
from my
listening to your
own
podcast,
personal life
there is a
experience and
sponsor for you.
memory
So forget
and
liking
kind of
something.
let that
If you
drive
really
the
want to
creative
monetize your podcast,
process.
it's not as
I can
hard as you
see
think. I think that's
how
like
that would be like
it's a
a
thing in
fruitful
people's head. Like there's
strategy to
websites you
produce
can
these.
find where
I
they'll
did also
connect you
want to
with
ask a
certain
couple
things
more
similar to how
technical
I found Sam.
questions,
It's not,
specifically
you have
like
to get over
where
that
do you
hump of
host
like,
mindfully minutes and
I
why did
don't have
you
a
pick this
podcast where I can
platform?
monetize. Like,
So I
yeah, you
used
could. If
to
you
host
have
it on
150
Anchor,
people listening to your podcast, you can
and
monetize it,
I
honestly.
recently made the
Yeah.
switch
And I
to
definitely think that
Megaphone.
finding
I
your
made
niche
the
comes into
switch
that as well, because
specifically
if you
because
have a niche or
there's
you
just a
speak
few
to a
more
niche,
features
then there'll
on
be other people
Megaphone.
selling these kind of
A
niche products,
show
and your audience
of
would be very
my
attracted to
size,
those
again,
sorts of
trying
things.
to,
So I think
be
you're absolutely
professional
right,
on
and
the
I do want
back
to
end,
ask some
that
more
make
questions
things
more
run a
towards the
little bit
technical
smoother.
side. Where do
However,
you
I still
host
host
Causing
my
the
other
Effect, and
show,
why did you
Meditation
pick
Mama,
this platform
on
specifically?
Anchor. So
Sure.
they're two different
Buzzsprout I
platforms, but they're
use.
both owned by
Buzzsprout
Spotify.
was at the
And I would say
time
Megaphone
one of
is
the
like
I
the
just
one
did like a
when you need to
test
kind of level up your hosting
of the different
platform.
hosting sites,
And like Anchor is a great
Podbean
place
and all those
for
other
shows of
ones.
any size. So
And the
essentially, like
truth
it's
is,
really
I wanted to
easy
focus on
to kind of like get
not
started and
having
host a
to
show
worry
of
about
like
the
any
hosting
size,
website.
and it's
Podcasting is
free. And
difficult enough
I use those
having
two.
to
And you
edit and
mentioned there
do
about there were
the
certain
audio.
features that
So I
enticed
said,
you to
what is
move
going to
over
be
to
the
Megaphone
easiest, most
to make
efficient
more
way
professional
that
work.
once
What
I've
were
really
those
polished
features?
with my episode,
So
could
ever
I get
since
it
I
on and
started
get it
running
up?
ads on
And
my
that was really
show, kind
the
of
whole
back
gist of them. They've
in
also
2020
actually, if
is one of
people
those things
are
that I,
thinking about
started
this whole thing
dabbling
of
in,
how do I
which was
monetize, they actually
interesting
do a
because
nice
I think
little
now we're pretty
sponsorship
used to
partnership where they'll
listening
connect you with
to
people on that level too.
advertisements
So I
on
did like that to
podcasts. Like
start. I
most
tried
people
it. It wasn't
know
for
that
me because it
they're
just didn't
most
go kind
likely
of with
going
my
to be
shtick.
there.
Mhm.
But for
And
me,
but that
I
wasn't
still
necessarily the
use
case. Like
Buzzsprout.
it
I'm
was
not
still
going
newer
anywhere.
in
They're very
2020, and so I
affordable.
did get a little bit of
Probably
pushback from my
$25 a
audience
month for
when I
anything
started to
over like
monetize
10
it in
hours
that
of content
way.
a
But
week. And that's a lot of
since
content. You're not
then,
gonna
I
be doing
think
that
we've
much.
just gotten a lot
But
more
you could
used
start
to
off lower,
hearing
as
ads
low
on
as $12
podcasts.
and go
And
right
I
up
have really
to
specific boundaries
20,
for my show in
$30. So
particular.
That's
Like
helpful to know.
anyone
And
who's listening, it's
what
like
do
I would
you
never listen
consider
to a
to be your
meditation with like an
greatest
ad in the
success in
middle. Do
podcasting,
not
Scott?
work. That's not at all
so
what it
when
is. I
as you
don't
go
do
through the
that.
process
There's just like one at the
of getting on
beginning
shows
before
and
the
all this stuff, that's
meditation,
more
or if we're
what my
doing like
focus
a
was
free form or
spreading
like a
my word
lecture
to more people. And there was like the
meditation,
Joe
no
Rogan
guided practice. There
podcast
might
of
be a
Canada
couple
is
in
a
there, but
show
I have like
called
really firm boundaries around
Grimerica.
what I allow
And
and
it's
what
these
I
two
don't
brothers,
allow,
Darren
to
and
make sure it
Rob,
doesn't
and
take away from like
they
any
have over
meditation
what,
practice.
700-800
But one
episodes. They
feature
talked to a lot
that
of
I didn't
people. They
even really know
had,
this was a
eight
thing
to 12 million downloads,
until I was
very much of like the
considering
Rogan
swapping. But there's
of
two
Canada.
different
And I
ways
got
that you
on their
can do
show, which was, I
advertisements.
would
One is
say,
called
which
like a
at that
baked
point
in
was like the
advertisement,
biggest
which is like
success of
where when I'm
whatever.
creating the
That
episode, I
was
do the
that was
ad
just a big
read,
deal
and
for
then
me
it's
because
just
I
like
was like,
baked in. It lives
this was
there on the
cool that
episode
we
that I
did
create
5
forever.
hours in total,
And then
3
there's
hours on there
something called a
filtered, and then another
dynamically
2 hours on there
inserted
unfiltered.
advertisement,
And then
which is where you
they
can go through on the
knew
back end
Randall Carlson,
and
who I
mark
mentioned earlier this
where you
episode,
would
who was
allow an
the
ad to
geologist
run
on
on
Rogan.
that episode.
They gave me his number.
But
We
you
got to
can then kind
chat,
of
and like
change out
having
what
to
that
speak
ad
to literally the
is.
person
So
who
that's
I
how, like,
saw
if you
on
listen to
I saw
a
him on
podcast
YouTube
and
with 6
maybe the
million,
episode is a year or two
people on and all
old,
this stuff.
but you
It
listen
was
and the
such a
ad
surreal
is
experience just
new, or it's like
to get an opportunity opportunity to talk to Randall and, have that.
they're using
And he will be coming on
dynamically
my show
inserted
later this year as
advertising,
well.
which is
So
really kind of
when that
nice
happens, that
because
will probably be the
having
biggest
been
thing, because it will be like
podcasting
that.
for
Me and
so
Rogan are on the
long, it
same level in
allows me
some weird
to
form.
keep,
Yeah, let me know when that show comes out, and
advertisers
I'll
and
take a listen to that.
advertisements
And
fresh
I
across
also
a
want to know, we've
library
talked
of,
about a lot
6
of
years with the
key
podcast.
elements here,
So
such as
then
like
I can then
consistency,
continue
obviously,
to
like putting your passion into the
advertise
show,
and help
really
drive
doing your
revenue,
homework,
like, to my
promoting yourself
show,
by
which
getting
is
on
the
other
only reason that
shows.
I can,
But I want to know, in
continue
your
to do it
opinion,
for
what do you
so
think it
long.
takes
As you
to
know,
create
Sam,
a successful
podcasting is
podcast?
a lot
You have
of
to
work.
look at that
And
word,
for a really
right?
long time,
Success.
we were, single
Again,
income. My
I'm
husband's
kind
going
of
to medical
giving
school
this
for a very
life,
long time.
this
Well,
life
up
advice,
until this
but you have
last
to look
year.
at what success,
And so for me,
how,
it
what you have
was,
to
that
define
was a really
success to
important
you.
part, is that I was able
If
to,
you don't
be
have
financially responsible for my
the North
family, as
Star
well
to
as
aim
I
at, you're
worked on this
not going to know
passion
what you're
project.
doing. And I think
But it
setting
makes
some
it so
goals
that
for
I can kind
yourself
of
of
keep
what success
that
is, whether it be
content fresh
monetary, whether it be non-monetary, whether it be viewership, whether it be non-viewership. Set your boundaries the way that you want. You have to do that on a month over month, over quarter by quarter, year by year basis, because then you'll just float through space, and that's why you'll end up going a year without growing. Not saying that it's all about growth, but usually if success is involved, then there will have to be some sort of growth. You want to be able you have to have the boundaries and the system in place so you know the game that you're playing. If you don't know the game you're playing, then you're not going to have any focus. So what I would say is have this overarching vision of what you'll do. I think Sam read mine in the beginning. It's just really to explore the mind, body, and spirit, to really have that. Then you have to granularly have these goals that you want to hit, whether it be the viewership, whether it be I want to monetize in 6 months, but you have to hold yourself accountable to that. It's very easy to let everything pass by here because the podcast is only, this is why I love podcasting, because it's on me, and I'm a person who doesn't trust people, so this is why it's all on me, but I like it that way. You have to hold yourself accountable, and that's difficult for some people to do, with diets, with this and that. The most important thing to do is set them and then stick to them, and if it doesn't, okay, that's fine. Why not? What is good about it? Don't be too hard on yourself, because this is not easy stuff you're doing, and really move forward with that, because as you set the goals, you will shatter them if you're putting in the work. I guarantee that.
Yeah, I think that you are evidence that I've always really admired how this isn't your primary job. Like, you have a full-on day job, and yet you have been so consistent with this passion project. And even now, it's blossomed into something that is making you decent money. And yeah, I'm so pleased to see how far you've come in the years that I've known you. And I think that the advice that you shared is yeah, if listeners go and replicate that, there's absolutely no reason why they can't achieve the same success that you've seen. And I would highly recommend everyone go listen to Causing the Effect. Go follow it, go leave a review. But Scott, if people are listening to this and they want to keep up with you personally, I know you've recently done a bit of a detox from social media. What's the best way for them to keep up with you?
Yeah, just check out the Instagram, Causing the Effect podcast, and the email. If you guys have any questions, I am backlogged. I'm getting through them. Causing the Effect podcast at gmail.com. Really, what I want to do is just be a vessel for you guys to really help and just be that shoulder to lean on. If you guys need help, let me or Sam know, because we're like, and so you can go back. Sam is one of the realest people I've met in my life, and I'm just grateful to have him. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for the show. So whatever I can do to help you and whoever's starting, more than happy to do so.
Fantastic, Scott. Thank you so much for your time today. As always, it is so wonderful chatting with you.
If anything, basically for every 20 minutes or so, I'll allow an ad. So
thanks for joining us today. And remember, you can find more helpful resources to grow your business with podcasting on our blog at podwritten.com and on Instagram at podwritten. You can also find a full transcript for this episode on our website, so be sure to visit podwritten.com or follow the links in the episode description. Until next time, stay healthy, happy, and successful.
Or maybe, the second one for that episode, there's a room for like a DIA one. So I kind of do a little bit of a combo.